Welcome to the Rosenfeld Review. Lou Rosenfeld here with Cheryl Platz. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning, Lou. It's good to be back.
Great to have you back, Cheryl, and I'm really excited. Last time we spoke, you had just completed a book for us, Design Beyond Devices. Great book, terrible timing because I think it was like right around the time the pandemic was really kind of sort of destroying everything, and people weren't really paying attention to very much. I think now, I don't know if this time is like so much better, but
we
maybe
don't have time to unpack all of that.
Exactly. We just maybe we've just gotten used to the way things are. That there is no certainty. That illusion has been ripped from our eyes. But your new book, The Game Development Strategy Guide, is now available on pre-order. We're recording this in late July 2025. The book is going to be published in mid-September 2025, but it is available now at 15% off if you want to pre-order it. Cheryl, we've known each other since I heard you speak at Interaction Latin America in Medellin. I think it was back right before the pandemic in those good old days, maybe 2018, 2019. And you've just done a lot in the industry. I think of you as an expert in many aspects of design. Right now we're talking about game design. Why don't you help me out here and do the kind of brief self-introduction that I would just fumble anyway?
Well, that's very kind of you, Lou. I will do my best. So it's good to see everybody again. My name is Cheryl Platz, and I am a user experience designer, game designer, teacher, author, and I've had many chapters in my career when I try to explain myself to employers, which is challenging in a crowded market like this when people want to put you into a box. But one of the chapters of my career, which those of you who read my Design Beyond Devices book are familiar with, is multimodality and sort of humanistic design around devices, experiences that cut across boundaries, right? I worked on Alexa, I worked on Cortana, I worked on Windows Automotive, those sorts of things. I also spent a fair amount of time working on very traditional information technology experiences like Azure and Dynamics 365. But my career actually started in video games, and I spent half a decade in video games before going on my big decade walkabout. And after the pandemic, when everything just sort of went bonkers, I was like, why not go back? And I've spent the last 4 years or so in senior leadership at several major video game companies you may have heard of. And another thing that happened during the pandemic that you and I haven't necessarily talked about was I connected with my video game roots on TikTok. I started telling the story of my early video game days, and that kind of blew up, and I built a little community around that. And that all led to this journey here, me returning to video games, me starting to become a director of user experience, and eventually currently a creative director of a game studio. And that's how we ended up where we are today, writing the Game Development Strategy Guide, talking about perspectives that cut across not just user experience, but game design, art, engineering, all of the disciplines that it takes to create these very complex pieces.
Well, the really, really, really interesting things are always at the intersections, right? And I think so much of what we do in UX is sort of built on intersections of intersections of intersections. So speaking of intersections, let's start with the intersection of UX and game development. So a lot of our listeners are, quote, traditional UX people. Maybe they have a lot of experience in large enterprises, maybe startups, but I think for the most part, they're veterans of the big places, the big, messy, confusing political places. What do you see as if those people are trying to kind of make a move like you did in the last few years and move into the video game industry, do they have a fighting chance? Do they have a superpower? Are there even jobs right now?
Well, all great questions. And I can certainly empathize, having also come from some of the big political places. And I want to be super transparent about where we are in the games industry right now, because as you mentioned, timing is interesting. Has been a rough couple of years for the video game industry. We have seen over 35,000 layoffs, and I think the count has gone up significantly in the last few weeks. I haven't checked the most recent numbers because of the Microsoft layoffs, uh, and I was one of them. I got laid off from Riot Games last January. That was one of the reasons I actually pitched the book, was because I thought I had time to kind of write it. We still figured it out, but uh, so what I'm not, this book is not like a gold rush trying to get people to chase a bunch of openings that aren't there. This book is about us trying to define the industry we want to see, because the industry we have is no longer working. It's no longer serving us. But there are pockets where new models are working. So much has changed about the video game industry in the past decade or two. When the internet finally sort of landed and transformed gaming, and we ended up with Steam as a distribution model, and we ended up with live service games, the way players interact with our games fundamentally changed, but the way we develop games, the way we think about staffing games, didn't. Um, but back to your original question, what about people coming from these big companies, coming from UX at these big companies? The skills are absolutely transferable. User experience is critical, especially on bigger games where you probably have a ton of concepts to manage. And the longer the game is, the more you have to help players manage, and the more edge cases you're going to run into. I think if we look at a game like Cyberpunk 2077, that game is now looked at as kind of like a sustaining classic, but it almost tripped over itself in its launch for basic things that I think user experience designers would have been best positioned to raise a hand about.
Like what?
Their save system. Their save system was not keeping up with players. It on certain types of devices, it was basically over optimized for solid state storage, and they didn't think through scenarios of like, what impact might this have on players if someone's dealing with a traditional storage device. How important is saving to players, and what context does a player save? How emotional might a player get if their save gets deleted? These are things that, like, a game designer, and I talk about the relationship between game design and UX design. Game designers are often talking about how to shape behavior over time to kind of change a player's interaction with the game. But often user experience designers, when paired with a game designer, are working on perception, are working on reaction, working on best practices and standards. How do players react to things, and how do we design a system to make those reactions as good as possible, like the instincts, whereas game designers are kind of trying to do the shaping over time and getting players where we want them to go. Now there's a give and take, and often the other place where user experience designers lean in a lot is tutorials and onboarding, where game designers are often so close to the game that it's hard for them to say what's hard or hard for them to teach. And I could go on about that, the importance of teaching your game, for hours, but I know we have a short amount of time. But that's another place where, like, this is a classic problem in IT software: apps not onboarding people enough, and that is a common problem in games as well. So if you are a user experience designer who's good at deconstructing what someone struggles with and turning that into learning, that's a problem games struggle with all the time. And that's something I'm currently working on. Was working on it at my last studio, and was trying to champion at the studio before that, as a timeless skill to bring to the field.
So that's an interesting point, because I imagine not everyone in the traditional gaming industry is going to understand. Like you said, they're often too close to the games. They may not understand some of these challenges, like learning the game, onboarding the user. Let's sort of broaden the remit of our conversation a little bit to teams and cross-functional collaboration on those teams. Do you find that people who come from maybe who are responsible for design, game design, are like having a really hard time communicating these types of challenges to other members of the team? Like, this is the sort of thing in non-gaming environments that like, hey, I'm not going to listen to the designer. They don't have any power. They don't have any confidence. They don't show. I don't know what their value is. Why should I take them seriously? I mean, I'm taking a very extreme position here as a non-designer, but we see that. And do you see that in the gaming environment?
Absolutely. And I think the 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 gulf in communication between the teams doing the development, the direct development of games, and the teams doing like the senior leadership of games, or sometimes the gulf between the company doing development, the company doing publishing, is some of what's behind some of the like the large scale layoffs you see, where it's just easier for a company to walk away than it is to solve the difficult problems of
Mm,
like what's wrong with this game, why doesn't it resonate for me, why does it feel hard to make this game. But there are, I have been in the trenches with games that felt hard, but when you get in there and you know what levers to pull, when you know what questions to ask, when you know what curiosity to lead with, even when a game feels wobbly after years, you can move it in the right direction. And so, yes, to answer your question, that communication challenges, they exist. And at a really macro level too, like I have experienced in recent years, people from outside, I've experienced being in a games unit that's inside a broader company that doesn't do games, and you see that model over at like a Hasbro, where it's like a video game group but it's also like a board gaming and toys group. A company like that has to ask itself, why does my video game team have so many people when my print and my licensing and my all the other teams don't? And when you just look at everything for raw numbers, it's real easy to lay off the team that looks, or like shrink the team that looks oversized, if you don't understand why it takes so many people or what the disciplines are or why it's hard to make those games. And I have more than once in the last few years wished I had this book to hand to people who were not actually making the game, and be like, this is why. This is why these people need to be here. This is why you need a technical artist. This is why you need this type of engineer. This is why. And when you get rid of them, this is the potential harm that happens, because it is challenging to make we're creating worlds. One of the people I talked to on the podcast, which during Play, which launches on August 19th, but uh, she talks about she wanted to create worlds. And if you think about that, the hubris of it, we're creating these interactive worlds that we expect not to break when we climb mountains and we attack things and we change ourselves. That's huge. A movie's just a linear 90 minutes. Everybody interacts with it the same way. And games, we are like, yeah, you can play it 100 hours, do whatever you want. Everybody's going to have a different experience. It's fine. Yes, that will be hard. But it's uh capitalism isn't engineered to like hard things.
yeah, or things that take a while, which are
Yeah.
often the same. It's interesting you're mentioning movies because I always think of that analogy, and we're never surprised. Well, maybe we are, but it's expected when you get to the end of that major motion picture, the list of credits that goes on and on and on, and all the roles, and yet, like, really sophisticated video games are, like I gotta think you have pretty much that many people involved, right? And so some organizations are able to pull that off. What differentiates the companies that really get it in the video game industry and are really like, yes, this is what we do. This is not a sideline from board games. We're not a small, two-person studio. This is something. This is our business. We make really major games that are, probably billions in revenue, right? How do they get to that point and where they can have that kind of cross-functional collaboration? What makes them special compared to others?
Well, some of it is the courage and comfort in ambiguity, right? You look at Alarian Studios, who shipped Baldur's Gate 3, which was one of the biggest hits in the last year or two. They had a long development period during which they worked a lot with the community, which is, I think, another one of the big differentiators. But uh, no one was telling them during that time that they had something special. There was no guarantee that they had something special. There was no income. They had to know Like they had to have a strong statement of internally, like, what was their vision, what did they want to achieve, what was their quality bar, when was it good enough. They had to be intrinsically motivated about what that thing was and build that shared understanding amongst the team, like, this is what we're moving towards. And you know, they and not chase other games, like they created something different. I see so many game studios think that the path to success is just build something someone else built, but then you're limiting your like, there's just so many things. It, Players have already played that game. They'll
And they're
just go back
locked
to the
in, I'm sure.
yeah. They're locked in. Exactly. Like, why would I go start your game, which is exactly the same as that one, when I already feel powerful and have spent 100 hours and a bunch of money in that one? But the other thing that differentiates a lot of these studios these days is the acceptance that the whole model has changed, and that we are not in a pre-internet society, and that the community's out there and they want to hear from you during the development of your game. They want to have a hand in the development of your game. They want to give you feedback during the development of your game. And by doing so, they feel part of your game and are more likely to show up when the pre-orders happen, when the game goes on sale. The Balatros of the world, the Baldur's Gates of the world, you see many of the Kickstarters, like the pre-launch periods, the alphas, the betas, the backer previews, all of these things, those are not really optional anymore. Like, if you actually look at the matrix code of what games are succeeding, most of them have a very strong community outreach component. And it's hard and it's messy, but it's what gives this authenticity of development. And I think that becomes even more important in a world where AI starts to show up, because players want that authenticity. They want to know that they're supporting actual creators and not just something that was sort of randomly generated by AI at a keyboard.
Yeah, I think we tend to underestimate the human's ability to detect AI bullshit. And I think we're all going to learn that one way or another soon enough. But just getting back to what you're just saying a moment ago, like the differentiation between games in specific spaces, you're saying so someone's already locked into game X. Why make your version of game X? But that said, I've had a little bit of sort of secondhand experience as a father of a kid who was just like an incredible gamer from ages like, I don't know, 11 to 16. He's 17 now. And he played so many shooter games, for one. There's just a bazillion of them, but the ones I remember that he really resonated with were the ones that had really interesting character development. And he got to be, this character versus that character. I think TF2 was it. Also, I just remember him being really and me by extension, blown away by the beauty of some games, like Subnautica. It's incredibly beautiful. It's not necessarily that different, probably from a lot of other sort of exploratory world-building games, but the aesthetics of it were unbelievable. And I'm wondering, is that something, those kind of differentiators, is that something UX people can bring something to? Is that play to our wheelhouse at all, or is it really a different skill set?
Well, I think we're uniquely positioned to help people understand what players are maybe looking to get from our games. Because, I say don't chase other games, but at some point you will be in a genre, right? And there will be other games in your space, unless you are the very rare game that's inventing a genre. And so having a hypothesis about, like, what is unique about your game, or what motivators of play that I talk about in chapter 1 that you want to lean into that are going to keep your players coming back. That's important. And the skill set that user experience design and research bring are, I think they're best positioned to kind of like learn from observing players and saying, what, actually, we did a bunch of prototyping, and actually our visuals are really resonating with people. Our game is leaning into immersion. It's a shooter, but it's a shooter that brings you somewhere else, versus a story-based shooter where it's about, projecting yourself into this character. No single and they can also help people The other thing is like no one of those factors is enough to ship a successful game. Like Concord had an incredibly rich set of stories for their characters, and it was shut down in weeks. Now, and so user experience can also help people understand, like, are there points in friction in the service design of the game, in the launch plan of the game, in the UI of the game that might get between you and the differentiators that would might prevent your players from ever experiencing those differentiators. Because so often there's something that's really amazing, but like there's just a couple, you forget that inventory management is terrible.
Hmm.
And so an amazing game that is supposed to be immersive is not, because you have to press a button 3 times to move one object between the store and your pack.
Well, one of the first things you get into in the book, of course, is player motivation. And you do talk about video games being a little different than analog games, and that self-expression and community are even more important. And like those are two really important factors you lean into. And I do think people with our, I don't know, background, toolkits, whatever skill sets, can really help in those areas. Cheryl, we're going to take a quick break. All of you listening in, we are talking with Cheryl Platz about the Game Development Strategy Guide, which we just put on pre-order at 15% off. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm going to give you 5 reasons you should be using the Rosenverse. First one, where else are you going to find 100 events that you can attend for free every year, 2 a week, about product management, product design, and UX design, plus a highly engaged Slack-based community of over 13,000 of your peers. What else are you going to find in the Rosenverse? You'll find hundreds and hundreds of recordings of conference presentations and community session recordings, all in one place from a single search browser interface. And behind those hundreds of recordings are hundreds of experts, people who have advanced the field, people who are your peers who are doing interesting new things, all in one place. Why else should you use the Rosenverse? We've been advancing the field of UX since 2005. You're going to find the most advanced content on such topics as design operations and program management, UX research, and a host of other topics, from climate UX to civic design to how designers can work better in product organizations. Lastly, you've been trusting our content since we started back in 2005. Whether it's our books, our conferences, our community sessions, well, we think you're going to trust the way we've brought those all together so that you can spend less time searching and browsing and more time learning and benefiting. I hope you'll try out the Rosenverse, and I hope you'll consider upgrading to a gold paid membership, because it brings you a lot more. Not only do you have access to hundreds and hundreds of recorded conference presentations, but you also get access to the Rosenbot, which is a ChatGPT 4 level chatbot that we've been training on all of our content, including our growing collection of nearly 60 books and counting. It's all there, it's all great content, and the Rosenbot is a cutting-edge way to get at it. You can try the gold membership out with a trial for 2 weeks. Give it a try. Hope you like it. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. Lou Rosenfeld talking with Cheryl Platz about the Game Development Strategy Guide, crafting modern video games that thrive. Thrive, Cheryl. I know that's a very important word for you in this context. And for me, I think for you as well, a lot of that means sustainability, that the game is something that isn't just going to make a quick impression but be a flash in the pan. It's something that takes a lot of probably energy and effort on the game developers over time. They're not done at launch, but there's also like the economic aspects here. Can you kind of give us the sort of 30-second version of what sustainability means in this context? Is it different than a sustainable effort to sell cars or manufacture cars?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think there's an interesting if you look 20 years ago, there was basically one model of selling games, which was a person pays up front, gets physical media for game, plays game. And in the book, I call that the pay to pay or pay for access model, right? But there are so many other ways that players exchange money for services in the video game world now. And if for online games, it has been deemed more desirable that games be perceived in most cases, not all, as free to play, and that the exchange of money for services come for some other value in the game. Now, a lot of games suffer when they don't accurately connect the value they think they're offering with money to what players actually value or want. And there's a lot of ways where that mismatch can happen, right? One of the ones you see players complain the most about, like the place where you could get the most out of whack, is where the what I call the pay for power model in the book, where you are selling players items in the game that change the balance of gameplay.
So like through
They're
microtransactions, that type of thing, or
yes, and
in-app transactions.
yes, and you can use and microtransactions are a very generic term. They can apply to anything. I could buy a hat. I could buy a gun. I could buy access to a map. I could buy access to energy. And the way you deploy your microtransactions has huge impact on the way your players perceive your game and the way they interact with your game, right? And so selling energy through a microtransaction is paying for access to your game. That's basically kind of taking the big chunk of pay you gave up front for a $60 game and breaking it up and players playing for what they want as they need it. If you pay for like an accelerant to experience points, that's accelerating a player's progress through the game, which can be controversial to some players who are like, are you saying that gameplay isn't worthwhile? Like, why are you why? But for players who have limited time and want to experience your end game, that can be really valuable. So it's not inherently bad, but it starts to like make some players who are free to play feel a little bit left out.
Mm-hmm.
But on the furthest end of this, and then there's, pay to express, which is that self-expression element where players are, buying cosmetics for their avatars. And I cannot, I say this in the book, but I cannot overstate it is possible to overstate how important self-expression is in live service games. The entirety of like the League of Legends business model is basically self-expression. There is no way to pay for additional power in League of Legends. The entire business model is people buying cosmetics for their or a little bit of access, like buying access to specific champions, but you can earn your way to those champions too. So it's and I was in a game announcement chat yesterday in YouTube, and I watched people be like, "Gosh, if this game doesn't have more outfits than the last one, I'm not playing it." And this was an RPG, like it
Hmm.
has nothing to do with fashion, but players were like, and I cite research in the book that talks about how like quantitatively you can see the importance of self-expression has changed, but at the highest end of the spectrum is pay for power. When you sell players something that changes the balance of gameplay, and that can be really damaging to your community. If I, as a new player, come in and someone who is like paid a ton of money, and when I say a ton of money in some games, it's like a ton of money, like car amount of money. So they come in, they waltz into my battle, and there's no way me as a free to play player has any chance of defeating the new car, and that doesn't feel good. Like, why would I keep playing if I don't? And so but the player who spent the amount of money over there got what they wanted, right? And so how do you create, but their gameplay depends on the existence of other players to play against. And so how do you balance that game so that these new players are still coming in and still getting what they need, while the players who are spending a lot and getting, because it's not a judgment on those players, it's great that they are able to support the game. Like, that's critical for the survival of the studio. But what I see too often is studios seeing these very generous, very passionate players who are willing to spend what seems like an infinite amount of money and over optimizing the game for them,
Mm.
and and shutting out a large group of players who would maybe spend a little bit or maybe not at all. But over time, these players will life will pull them away, or another game will pull them away. And every time one of them goes away, you can watch the metrics go down. And so you need the resilience of the broader community pool.
Oh my God. Oh my God, what a great metaphor for the American economy. Oh my God. Cheryl, we could go on and on. This is and your book is just packed with so much that we didn't even come close to. Thank you for writing it. I think it's going to really be a game changer
I
for so
see
many
what you
people.
did there.
But it's great to talk with you about it. Everyone, the book is The Game Development Strategy Guide, Crafting Modern Video Games That Thrive. It comes out in mid-September, but you can pre-order it at 15% off from Rosenfeld Media until then. I think you could pick it up at Amazon as well at this point, if you must. But when you buy from us, of course, you get not only the digital copies included with the paperback, but you also are supporting your favorite independent UX book publisher and their authors. Cheryl, before we wrap, did you bring a gift for our listeners today?
Did. So I'm bringing game now. If you're like a gamer, you might already be familiar with this game, but I'm assuming that this is a broader audience here. And so, a game my community brought to me because I stream most Sundays. At 10 a.m. Pacific on Twitch at Funny Godmother. And my community likes to bring me indie games, games that I might not have played otherwise. And they brought blueprints, not blueprints like the thing in architecture, although it is a pun. Blue, like the color, and prince, like the royalty, right? And this game is one of the most replayable games or sustainable games I've seen in a long time. And it's chill. It's also one of the most chill games. Like, it doesn't force you through any timelines. You can just leave it sitting in the background and come back to it. But it's an architecture game. It's a roguelike architecture game. So every day you've inherited this house from your mysterious now dead uncle, I think. And the only way you can accept your inheritance is to discover this secret room in the house. The problem is the house is not deterministic. The room, like the plot of the house, changes every day, and you have to draft the house room by room as you go through it. And there is strategy. There's different colors of rooms, like the purple is the bedrooms, and blue is like the drafting rooms, and green is the plant rooms, and so all the rooms affect each other. And then there's this underlying story and mysteries and puzzles that cut. There's like 4 acts in the game. And so if you like any of those things, if you like puzzles, if you like these games with this random element, if you like that kind of control, if you just like having a chill game, all of those things, Blueprints has been lovely. And it's, looking right now, it looks like it's priced under $30 on Steam on PC. So that's, you get a lot of game for that.
Wow, you're giving me Meow Wolf vibes digitally here. Well, Cheryl, thanks so much for joining us on the Rosenfeld Review, and I'm so excited to see what people think of your book. Soon enough, we'll find out. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Game on, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Rosenfeld Review, brought to you by Rosenfeld Media. If you like our show, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. I'd love it if you tell a friend to have a listen, and check out our website for over 100 podcasts with other interesting people. You'll find them all at rosenfeldreview.com.